Slavery in Jamaica was a cruel system. It lasted for many, many years. European colonizers, first the Spanish and then the British, brought this system to the beautiful island. They wanted to grow crops like sugarcane, and these crops made a lot of money for them in Europe. But this wealth was built on the suffering of others. The land was rich, but the lives of many became very poor in spirit and freedom. They did not choose this life. It was forced upon them. The idea of owning another human being is, honestly, very wrong. Under slavery, people were treated like property. They could be bought and sold just like animals or tools. Families were often torn apart. Mothers lost their children. Husbands lost their wives. This was a time of great sadness and injustice. The colonizers did not see the enslaved people as equals. They saw them only as a way to get work done for free. This system denied people their basic human rights and their dignity. When the British took over Jamaica from the Spanish in 1655, the plantation system grew much larger. Sugar became the main crop, and it was very profitable. This sugar was sometimes called white gold. To grow and process sugar cane required a huge amount of hard labor. The British planters needed many workers. They did not want to pay for this labor, so they turned to the horrific trade of enslaved Africans. This decision shaped Jamaica's history in profound and lasting ways. The start of large-scale sugar plantations marked a dark turn. The demand for sugar in England and Europe was very high. More plantations meant more enslaved people were needed. The system became more organized and more brutal. Laws were made to control the enslaved people. These laws gave slave owners almost total power over the lives of the enslaved. It was a system designed to crush the human spirit, but as we will see, the spirit of the Jamaican people could not be easily broken. They would fight for their freedom. Africans were brought to Jamaica against their will. They came from many different parts of West Africa. These were people with their own cultures, languages, and traditions. They were doctors, farmers, artists, and leaders in their communities. They were not just nameless workers, they were individuals with rich lives. Slave traders captured them in cruel raids. Sometimes they were tricked or sold by others. This journey across the Atlantic Ocean was called the Middle Passage. It was a terrible and deadly experience. The ships that carried the enslaved Africans were overcrowded. People were packed tightly together in horrible conditions. Many got sick and died during the long voyage. There was not enough food or clean water. The air below deck was foul. The journey could last for many weeks or even months. Those who survived the Middle Passage arrived in places like Jamaica weak and terrified. They were far from their homes and everything they knew. They faced a future of forced labor and great uncertainty. Once they arrived in Jamaican ports like Kingston or Port Royal, the Africans were sold. They were sold at auctions, like goods. Families were often separated at these auctions if they had managed to stay together on the ship. Planters would examine them, checking their health and strength. The strongest ones who could do the most work were sold for the highest prices. It was a deeply dehumanizing process. They were given new names and forced to forget their past. This was another way the slave owners tried to control them. The enslaved Africans were taken to plantations all over Jamaica. These plantations were mostly for growing sugarcane. Some also grew coffee, cotton, or other crops. The new arrivals had to learn new, harsh routines. They were forced to work from sunrise to sunset, and sometimes even longer. They had to adapt to a new environment, new foods, and a new, cruel system of life. But even in these terrible circumstances, they found ways to remember their African roots. They held on to their cultures as best they could. Life for enslaved people on Jamaican plantations was honestly incredibly hard. The work in the sugarcane fields was back-breaking. Men, women, and even children were forced to labor for long hours under the hot sun. They planted, weeded, and harvested the cane. Then they had to process it in the boiling houses, which was dangerous work. Accidents were common. The overseers, who were white men, used whips and other cruel methods to make people work faster. There was little rest and no pay for their labor. The living conditions were also very poor. Enslaved people lived in small, basic huts. These huts often had dirt floors and were not well protected from the rain or heat. Their food was usually simple and not always enough. They might get rations of cornmeal, salted fish, or yams. Many tried to grow their own small gardens to add to their food supply. Healthcare was almost non-existent. Sickness spread easily and many died young. Despite these hardships, they formed communities and supported each other. Punishments for any perceived wrongdoing were severe and brutal. Enslaved people could be whipped, branded, or put in stocks. More serious acts of resistance could lead to even worse punishments, including death. Slave owners wanted to create a climate of fear. They wanted to stop anyone from thinking about escape or rebellion. Laws, called slave codes, gave owners almost complete control. These laws denied enslaved people basic human rights. They could not own property, marry legally, or learn to read and write. Despite the constant suffering, enslaved people showed amazing strength and resilience. They found ways to keep their spirits alive. They told stories from their African homelands. They sang songs and played music. These cultural expressions were a form of quiet resistance. They helped people to remember who they were. They secretly practiced their own religions and traditions. Family and community bonds were very important. They created new family structures and supported each other through the terrible times. This inner strength was really vital for survival. Resistance to slavery in Jamaica started almost as soon as slavery itself began. It took many forms. Some acts of resistance were quiet and happened every day. Enslaved people might pretend to be sick to avoid work. They might work slowly on purpose. Sometimes they broke tools or damaged crops. These small acts might seem minor, but they were ways for people to fight back in a system that tried to control everything. They showed that the enslaved people did not accept their situation. Another important form of resistance was running away. Many enslaved people tried to escape the plantations. Some ran away to join existing communities of free Africans. Others tried to form their own hidden communities in the mountains. These escapees were called Maroons. The word maroon likely comes from a Spanish word meaning wild or runaway. The mountains of Jamaica, like the Blue Mountains and the Cockpit Country, were difficult to reach. This made them good places for Maroons to hide and live freely. The Maroons were skilled fighters and survivors. They knew the land very well. They built their own villages and grew their own food. They created their own societies with their own leaders and rules. They often raided plantations to get supplies and to free other enslaved people. The British colonial government saw the Maroons as a big threat. They sent soldiers to try and capture them and destroy their communities. But the Maroons fought back bravely. They used guerrilla warfare tactics, using their knowledge of the terrain to their advantage. The Maroons became symbols of freedom and resistance for other enslaved people in Jamaica. Their existence showed that it was possible to escape slavery and live free. There were several groups of Maroons in different parts of the island. The two main groups were the Leeward Maroons in the west, in the Cockpit Country, and the Windward Maroons in the east, in the Blue Mountains. They fought long wars against the British. These wars, known as the Maroon Wars, were a major challenge to the colonial authorities and the system of slavery. One of the most famous Maroon leaders was Nanny of the Maroons. She was a leader of the Windward Maroons in the early 18th century. Nanny is a national heroine of Jamaica. She is remembered for her bravery, her wisdom, and her strong leadership. She was a spiritual leader as well as a military strategist. Legends say she had special powers. For example, some stories say she could catch bullets. These stories inspired her people and made her a feared figure among the British soldiers. Nanny played a crucial role in organizing the Maroons' resistance. She guided her people in their fight against the British. She chose strategic locations for their villages, like Nanny Town in the Blue Mountains. This made it hard for the British soldiers to attack them. She was skilled in guerrilla warfare, and her fighters used ambushes and surprise attacks. Nanny also emphasized the importance of unity and discipline among her people. She helped them to maintain their African traditions and their sense of community. The British fought many battles against Nanny and the Windward Maroons. They found it very difficult to defeat them in the mountainous terrain. Nanny's leadership was key to the Maroons' success in these conflicts. She inspired them to fight fiercely for their freedom and their way of life. She understood the importance of land and independence. Nanny Town was a symbol of Maroon resistance. It was attacked several times by the British, but the Maroons often rebuilt it or moved to new, hidden locations. Nanny's legacy is very important for Jamaica. She represents the spirit of resistance against oppression. She showed that enslaved people would not simply accept their fate. They would fight for their freedom with courage and intelligence. Nanny is honored today for her incredible bravery and her contribution to the fight for freedom. She is a powerful symbol of female leadership and the enduring quest for self-determination. Her story reminds Jamaicans of the strength and resilience of their ancestors. Beyond the continuous resistance of the Maroons, there were also large-scale rebellions. These rebellions involved thousands of enslaved people. They were often planned and organized. These uprisings shook the foundations of the slave system in Jamaica. One of the earliest major revolts was Tacky's War in 1760. Tacky was an enslaved man from West Africa, believed to have been a chief in his homeland. He led a rebellion that started on plantations in St. Mary Parish. It quickly spread to other areas. Tacky and his followers aimed to overthrow the British and create a free black society in Jamaica. They attacked plantations, killed slave owners, and freed other enslaved people. The rebellion lasted for several months. It caused widespread fear among the white planters. The British colonial government used its military forces and also enlisted the help of some Maroon groups who had signed treaties with the British by then to suppress the revolt. Tacky was eventually killed and the rebellion was brutally put down. Many enslaved people were executed. Despite its violent suppression, Tacky's War had a significant impact. It showed the deep desire for freedom among the enslaved population. It also showed the planters that the system of slavery was not secure. The fear of future rebellions remained strong. Another very important uprising was the Baptist War, which took place in 1831 to 1832. This was also known as the Christmas Rebellion or the Sam Sharp Rebellion. It was one of the largest slave revolts in the British West Indies. It started in the western parishes of Jamaica. The Baptist War was inspired by the teachings of Samuel Sharp. He was an educated enslaved man and a Baptist deacon. He advocated for peaceful protest and a general strike for wages. However, the protest turned into a widespread rebellion. Thousands of enslaved people refused to work after the Christmas holidays. They demanded freedom and wages. Plantations were burned and property was destroyed. The colonial authorities responded with extreme force. The rebellion was crushed, and hundreds of enslaved people, including Sam Sharp, were executed. Samuel Sharp is a national hero of Jamaica. He was a well-respected leader and preacher. He believed that slavery was morally wrong and against God's will. He used his position as a deacon in the Baptist church to organize his people. He told them that they should no longer work as slaves. He planned for a peaceful strike after Christmas in 1831. He hoped that if everyone stopped working, the planters would have to pay them wages. He famously said, "I would rather die upon yonder gallows than live in slavery." Although Sam Sharp planned for peaceful resistance, the situation became violent. The Baptist War, as it became known, was brutally suppressed. Sharp was arrested and executed in May 1832. However, his actions and the rebellion had a huge impact. It helped to speed up the process of ending slavery in the British Empire. The British Parliament was already debating abolition. The scale of the Baptist War and the determination of the enslaved people showed that slavery could not continue peacefully. Sam Sharp's sacrifice was a major step towards freedom. Later, after slavery was abolished, new struggles for justice emerged. Paul Bogle, another national hero, was a Baptist deacon from St. Thomas Parish. He was a farmer and a strong advocate for the rights of poor black Jamaicans. They faced injustice in the courts, unfair taxes, and lack of access to land. Bogle led a protest march to the Morant Bay Courthouse in October 1865. This was to protest against these injustices. The protest turned violent when the authorities fired on the marchers. This event sparked the Morant Bay Rebellion. George William Gordon was a mixed-race politician and landowner. He was a friend of Paul Bogle and also a strong critic of the colonial government. He spoke out against the oppression of the poor. He was blamed for the Morant Bay Rebellion, even though he was not directly involved in the march. Governor Eyre, the colonial governor, had Gordon arrested, tried unfairly by a military court, and executed. Paul Bogle was also captured and hanged. Both Bogle and Gordon are remembered as national heroes who fought and died for justice and equality for all Jamaicans. Their actions highlighted the need for major changes in how Jamaica was governed. The Great Rebellions, especially the Baptist War led by Sam Sharp, played a crucial role in ending slavery. These events showed the British government that slavery was unsustainable. It was too costly to maintain, both financially and in terms of human lives. Public opinion in Britain was also turning against slavery. In 1833, the British Parliament passed the Slavery Abolition Act. This act declared that slavery would be abolished across most of the British Empire. This was a major victory for the enslaved people and those who fought for their freedom. However, full freedom did not come immediately. The Abolition Act included a system called apprenticeship. This meant that formerly enslaved people had to continue working for their former masters for several more years. They were supposed to be paid, but conditions were often still very harsh. Apprenticeship was meant to be a transition period. It lasted until 1838. On August 1st, 1838, tens of thousands of people in Jamaica finally achieved full freedom. This day is celebrated as Emancipation Day. It was a joyful and momentous occasion. Even after emancipation, life was not easy for most black Jamaicans. They faced discrimination and economic hardship. The old planter class still controlled much of the land and power. The Morant Bay Rebellion in 1865, led by Paul Bogle, highlighted these ongoing problems. It showed that the fight for true equality and justice was far from over. The harsh response to the rebellion led to changes in how Jamaica was governed. It became a crown colony, ruled more directly by Britain. This, however, did not satisfy the growing desire for self-rule. The spirit of resistance that had fought against slavery continued. It transformed into a movement for political rights and self-government. In the 20th century, leaders like Marcus Garvey inspired a sense of black pride and unity. Labor movements and political parties emerged, demanding more rights for Jamaicans. Figures like Alexander Bustamante and Norman Manley became key leaders in this new struggle. They campaigned for universal adult suffrage, the right for all adults to vote, and for Jamaica to have control over its own affairs. This long journey was leading towards full independence. After many years of struggle and negotiation, Jamaica finally achieved its independence. On August 6, 1962, Jamaica became an independent nation. This was a proud and historic moment. The British flag, the Union Jack, was lowered. The new Jamaican flag, with its black, green and gold colors, was raised for the first time. Black represents the strength and creativity of the people. Green represents hope and the island's agriculture. Gold represents the natural wealth and the beauty of sunlight. This day marked the birth of a new nation. Independence meant that Jamaicans could now govern themselves. They could make their own laws and decide their own future. It was a dream that many generations had fought for. From the Maroons who resisted in the mountains, to the rebels like Sam Sharp and Paul Bogle, to the political leaders of the 20th century, all had contributed to this moment. Independence was not just a political change, it was a powerful symbol of freedom, self-determination, and the triumph of the human spirit over oppression. For Jamaicans today, Independence Day is a very important celebration. It is a time to remember the past and honor the sacrifices of those who fought for freedom. It is a time to celebrate Jamaican culture and music, food and achievements. It is also a time to reflect on the journey since 1962. Independence brought new opportunities and new challenges. The nation continues to work towards building a better future for all its citizens based on the principles of justice, equality and opportunity. The story of Jamaica's fight for freedom is a story of incredible courage and resilience. It reminds us that freedom is precious and must always be defended. The legacy of the national heroes and all those who resisted slavery continues to inspire Jamaicans. It teaches the importance of standing up against injustice. Independence means taking responsibility for the nation's destiny. It means striving to create a society where everyone can live with dignity and achieve their full potential, true to the spirit of those who dreamed of a free Jamaica.